I am Yamato Cannon, and this is Muffin, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
As you've referenced it yourself a number of times, the Season 10 Worlds run in this interview already, right? I can understand why, because for you personally, it looked awesome. Like, everyone remembers, like, I actually think that summer, when you went back to Mid, you were even sort of peaking by the end of summer. You looked really good. That's actually the year where I don't think you even had the whole, like, craps thing. Maybe when you played, like, fucking ADC, you went in a few times. But at Mid, you actually looked really clean at this point in time. Like, even if the team wasn't maybe the strongest G2 ever, like you said, in scrims, apparently you were doing well. Caps himself, this was one of the best years of your career, right? Season 10. Like, you looked really good at that Worlds.
Thank you. I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely very happy about like the summer performance, I guess, on like an individual level. And as I said, like, especially coming from the AD carry one, which was a bit tougher. And I think going into Worlds, like the thing about that Worlds that makes me so sad is that we came into the Worlds, and just like every other Worlds, we were getting stumped by everyone. But this time we were even getting stumped by NA. Like, it was like everyone was making fun of us, you know. Like, we were actually just losing to everyone. But And again, the whole meta was very different from what we're used to, because as you mentioned before, like as I mentioned, I guess, like when Perkz was playing like the Saya, the Kai'Sa, and Jankos was like getting ganks off everywhere, we were just a very strong team. But this meta was like jungle just full clear, just farm and become as strong as possible, try to have like the most optimized pathing, and laners just get prio so that they can stop enemy jungle from farming, or like they can enable your jungle to farm more. And this was like as far away from what we play as a team and has played as a team. So of course we were losing, and of course we were doing poorly. But within the like first, our boot camp, like there was like 2 weeks or so, it went from us getting stumped by everyone to actually doing better and better every single day. And there was like huge levels of improvement. And that's why by the end, like when we actually lost and we had those weeks of scrim beforehand, we were actually just beating like everyone we were scrimming, right? And we were doing like so much better than at the start of it. And which is why it's so sad for me, because we really showed this huge level of improvement. And again, I will give a huge shout out to Perkz and Jankos especially, because it was so different for them. And I think they really stepped it up in like a lot of reviews and stuff, and explaining, like, getting their point of view across to the rest of the team. So to see us lose there, it just feels so like anticlimactic, because it feels like, if we lost Season 9 and we were just losing, it's like, fair enough, we were losing. But here, it really felt like we turned it around, like we were doing poorly, but everyone really put their hearts together, we worked hard, and then we just lost as well. So yeah, I think even less than me on an individual level, I think more just on like a team level and how everyone was, it feels very disappointing.
Even though I was personally, of this current T1 squad, a critic, like, I didn't think they had the 5 best players. And if I were them, I wouldn't even have done the run back. I would have tried to get, like, Canyon or someone crazy like that. I can understand why if someone wins Worlds, you want to run it back again. You want to see could we do it again, or what would happen one more year? Even though in this case, it's not like G2 won Worlds, but this 2 years was obviously incredible, and people know you're one of the only teams that, like, in almost all the international games, looked like you were always this close to the best teams and could beat them even, right? At the time, if you remember the way it went, that year, everyone re-signed the contract, so technically there was a world where it could have kept going, but then obviously this off-season, Perkz wanted to play Mid again, and this whole drama came along and he ended up leaving, right? Do you ever think back, could we have just kept that same line? Like, could Perkz have just stayed ADC and done a third year? Was it plausible? Could it have happened? Would you have liked to have seen it, just run the same squad for a third year in a row?
I mean, I think it would for sure work quite well. I think the biggest problem for us was that both of us just didn't like playing AD carry, and I think Perkz probably had a lot of the same experiences I had. Because I guess that was even a bit of the reason I lane swapped after Season 9, was that he didn't enjoy it that much then.
Right.
And he didn't enjoy it like in Season 10. And I definitely didn't enjoy it. Like, it was not enjoyable for me. So it was like, regardless if either of us decides to play AD carry, it will feel like we're not happy, And I think if you want to be the best, you really have to fight to make your decision correct. And if you're not happy about something, then you can maybe lose passion, and suddenly it gets a bit like, maybe it's not the best. So I don't know. I think it was a tough situation, and it's just a shame, right? Like, sometimes that's just life. Like, it's like, could we have, as players, made it work? For sure, I think it would be great, but I just don't know if it would have come at too much of a cost in like the thing, right? I mean, I think we even had some other talks about some other lane swaps that never ended up happening, right? I think maybe we were.
Can you give me a hint? Does someone want to go support or something? What was the role? Sort of Perkz go top lane? So what was it? Come on, give me one.
I mean, I definitely think there was a Winther and Perkz swapping around. I think that was one of them.
Well, like what did go ADC?
Yeah, so it was like we did that at Rift Rivals as well against Team Liquid in scrims. So we had already tried it out a little bit, and another one was like Mikyx was also open to playing AD carry.
Okay, but all right.
But there's also a funny time where Mikyx said that he was like, oh, I'm also open to being AD carry, and then Jankos just like burst out laughing. Like, you know how Jankos could do it, just like burst out laughing, and then that idea was just kind of like scrapped.
Oh, everyone just forgot about it. Too awkward, right?
Yeah, it was a little bit
Okay.
It was a bit weird. But there was for sure a lot of crazy things, and I mean, we never know how those would have gone. I guess season 11 didn't go that great anyway.
Yes.
So it's hard to do worse, but yeah, I think it's for sure a shame, because I think, again, as people, we really enjoyed each other, playing with each other, and even as like in the game, like as teammates, we all had like a very similar view on things, and we were good at like adapting different things and stuff like this. It's just really the AD carry position, and I'm sure it was the same for Perkz, but I think especially solo queue, like that was just it was difficult.
Yeah, if people don't get it, I have also heard the same thing. It's not even the scrims or the officials. It's just that, like, trying to grind to get better feels like a nightmare if you're stuck in, like, the game where you 1v9 as ADC, right? You just feel like you can't do anything compared to mid, I'm guessing. I
mean, for me, I can't speak for anyone else, right? But for me, the worst thing was just going to solo queue, my support logs in Sona, enemy logs in Nautilus, and I didn't know how to play the game. Like, I mean, for one, I every game in scrims I would obviously usually have like the Nord or the Rakan. I mean, later on we had like the Janna and stuff, but it was like into Tam Kench and Brom, like good matchups. But just playing like a Janna support into Nord, it felt pointless in a way, because I was like, okay, this will never happen on stage. Like, I'm just not gonna play this lane. But the second thing is, I also like to play quite aggressive, right? I don't like to just farm. And it's very, very hard to do that when you have a Nautilus just like hooking and one-shotting either you or Sona. And Sona at the time, especially, I think now they have balanced a bit better. But back then, Sona at the time was also just like, you would just go like 0-4 in lane, and then you would like hope your enemy froze, and at like 20 minutes, you would start like scaling super well. People started also playing like the Sona Taric to just like have super scaling. So it would feel kind of be like a thing where you're just like, a bit hoping your opponent froze the game, but also just playing like very slow and being happy just losing a little bit. And also just the fact that you get dove every slow push, you could just get dove because your jungler wouldn't cover you. Like, they wouldn't actually care about you at all. So it's like, yeah, it didn't feel great.
One thing to just close up the Perkz topic, I would say, is this, Caps, which is I also feel like you've been in one of the weirdest scenarios I've ever seen in sports, where normally, like, it almost feels like that was a dream, mate, because you're supposed to be Perkz' rival. Like, before that, you played against him a bunch. Afterwards, you played in the same role against you. Or he was even in LCS in Cloud9, etc. But then for these 2 years, you were somehow teammates and you were sharing the mid. It might be the most unique scenario I've ever seen in League. Like, it means you have a very different perspective on like a main rival. Like, you actually got to be his teammate for a while. How do you think of Perkz as a result? Like, give me this sense, right? Who is Perkz to Caps? Because to fans, like I even get why they don't like him, because to certain fans, if they just see him on his face value, he looks really cocky, or he is that smug guy who always the shit eating grin, saying the cheesy thing in line. But he's got a lot more depth maybe than people know. Who is Perkz to you?
I mean, I guess as like a rival, I would say that, like, again, I mentioned earlier, but I definitely learned a lot from him. So I learned a lot, both like in game from playing against him, but then later playing with him. He also taught me a lot of things. I think he's obviously like a very good leader, and he's very good at like getting people on the same page. And I think,
is that latter point underrated, do you think? Like, isn't that one of the things I'm guessing you saw when he wasn't in the team? It's like, maybe when they're there, you don't know what they're doing necessarily. But when you don't have that person who can sort of like get people on the right page or say something without it being contentious, it must be big, right?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think that's like, I always like to think that he's like, I think he's very good at getting everyone to be like a bit delusional in a way, right?
Okay.
Because he gets everyone on the same page to believe in something that maybe is like a bit out there, a bit crazy. But if he's very good, I think he's very good at convincing himself and others about anything. Like, if you had to have someone who can convince something about something, then that would be him, right? And for a lot of people, that would also be winning worlds, right? So, for example, for me, I believe I can win worlds, but maybe it's hard for me to convince others.
Sure.
I think he has an easier time of convincing people of anything, like it can be something crazy. It can be, sometimes it might be too crazy, right? but he's definitely very good at it, and I think we had a very good we have a very good relationship and working together as well, because he was very good, I guess, with people especially, and I feel like we had both had very strong opinions, and I think when we agreed on something, then it was like, okay, then everyone else will agree, because it's like it's a miracle we're agreeing, kind of, like not a miracle we're agreeing, but it's like if they agree, we will feel very strongly about it both, and it's very difficult to like convince us both about something else, if that makes sense.
Sure. By the way, even though now, in hindsight, this wouldn't even be a great question, but at the time, I wondered what you thought. When you guys made that super team with Rekkles the next year, and obviously everyone forgets this detail, in the spring, on the regular season, you guys were actually the best team. You were right there. It was you and Rogue, and at the time, no one fucking believed in Rogue, so everyone thought it was just G2. So everyone forgets it was only in the playoffs things started to go badly, right? When you guys had the initial like slip-ups, and then Perkz went and won the LCS, did you actually ever wonder, like, fuck, did we miss out? Should we not have let him go? Are we lacking some? Did it ever make you think that in that initial moment?
I think, probably not, just because of what I mentioned earlier with like, I think both of us wouldn't be happy playing AD carry.
Right.
So it's like, I think that it's just not really like, it's like it could have worked. Sure, it could have worked better. And obviously I was super disappointed with the results, and I was looking like, of course I was like, I don't want to say like, okay, I guess I was jealous, yeah. Like I was like looking at him doing well, right, and us losing. It felt bad for sure. But I think a lot of it, again, came from to some extent like what we were mentioning before, where like the patch in playoffs, like we got really hit by the patch, where the patch changed a lot going into playoffs. And suddenly we went from like doing very well, both in scrims and officials, to just like struggling everywhere, right? And instead of having like this moment I said at season 10 where it's like, oh, but everything changed and we like worked through it and we got better and we got back on the horse and we still lost, but we were winning scrims and we made semifinals and stuff, right? Instead, it kind of felt like we got off the horse, everything changed, but we tried to keep it the same, and then when it didn't work, it was like there was no one looking for a solution. It was more like a blame game, or like there was just no process to actually get us back on track. So and for sure from that it could be something where Perkz would be clutch, or at least like the way we had it last year, where we would have the like he would do a lot, right, to get us back on track and figure out like where we're gonna go from there. But it was just like a very different dynamic in season 11. So yeah.
Right, one thing I want to ask goes like this. You're in a position in your career where you've had so much success in Europe domestically that, like, aside from season 7, your first ever season, like, basically every year, a bad year for you would be to only win one LEC title or to only make the final and not win both or whatever. You had all these amazing... This one year was the year where you not only had the super team, you didn't make any of the finals. It's actually a very barren year for you. I want to know, how did you individually handle this? Like, for example, look, other people might look at the lineup and go, maybe there was mismatch between these two players, or maybe, like, again, maybe their team had been together for too long and people got tired of each other. There's a million angles you can go with, but what I want to know is, how do you personally handle it? Like, are you someone who internalizes it? If you do badly, do you think that means I'm playing badly? Do you take a lot of responsibility? How do you think of that one year? Is it a write-off? What do you think?
For sure, I think I was like very like sad about it, right? That's also why I mentioned, but even after season 10 Worlds, I was already feeling like I lost a lot of confidence, and then maybe normally I could rebuild it throughout the season 11. But that just didn't happen at all. Instead, I just kept getting hit further and further down. And I think part of me after season 10 was also thinking like, am I the problem, in the sense that like Europe hasn't won now, and since I joined, Europe still hasn't won Worlds. We won MSI, but we haven't actually won Worlds. And if I wasn't actually like taking up the first seed or something like this, it's like, is that the problem if someone else had the first seed? And so it started getting like very like diluted in a way, right? And getting a bit out there, and it's like I was of course I still wanted to win and I wanted to prove myself wrong in a way, but it was like I was almost like mentally I was making this picture of why I should be losing, or why I was almost cheering against myself, right? To give others the opportunity, which it's just like, yeah, my confidence was just like very low, right? And I think it was definitely difficult, and I took a lot of the blame on myself. Like I definitely think a lot of it. Even now I would still think a lot of it was on myself, right? Like as I said, this is like not the mindset to have to win championships. And I think it wasn't until like season 12, like when we lost to FNATIC, actually in that playoffs, that's when I think a lot of my confidence came back, which sounds a bit ironic. But basically, we lost to FNATIC, and I was was lying in bed the whole night awake, and I couldn't sleep, and I was just like, there's just no way I cannot win against these players. That was like my internal dialogue, my monologue. I was like, I am for sure better than all of them, and I can't just keep losing. There's just zero chance that this is actually happening.
Okay.
So I really put in a lot of like effort to get my. I think I became a lot more. Like I gave a lot more of my opinions. Which again, when you lose confidence, you start going a bit of a backstep. You're like, let others lead the team, so to say. Because you're not confident necessarily in your opinions. But after we lost that FNATIC game, I was like, I really wanted to push my ideas through, and I was really trying my best. And since then as well, right, I just make sure I get my thoughts out there, because it's like we don't always have to do what I say,
Sure.
but I at least want the ideas to be out there, and I will always fight for them, because unless you have something that I think is better, I would like to do it the way I think. And I think I had a lot of like talks with my staff as well, which helped me, and I got to like a way better place in terms of like managing expectations and like understanding that like there's more to it than just like the win or the loss, right? Sometimes things just also don't work out. Sometimes I'll make mistakes. Sometimes the plan I just said will just fail, and that doesn't mean that I should never make a plan again. That just means I need to make a better one. So I will just need to work harder, and I mean that's what I've been doing since. Sadly, not again gotten the world title yet, but I'm sure it's on the horizon.
Okay, along these lines then, let me just rewind a little bit. So if people remember, it's true, this was actually the split before this like lower bracket run where people were like, oh, his Cap's not that good now. What's going on with him? Like, is he not in the meta? He's playing like kind of a bit, you actually playing very reserved compared to the old Caps. You weren't the guy doing all the crazy hands plays. You were almost like a boring mage player at times, mate. So the question I have is this, right? First of all, what is the whole thing of like, so because my confidence went down, I changed the capitalization of my name. The reason I ask, right, is because you make it sound like a silly story, but I almost feel like this is part of your process. You try to, it's almost like superstition. You try to find some different anglers to like, now I'm this person, or I'm going to change something up, even if it's just something as silly as the name. Somehow that changes how you feel about the game or something. What was the perspective here? Because a lot of people would be shocked to find you lose confidence. Surely you're a great player. You wake up, you play the game, you know you're good. What was going on? What's this story about like the name capitalization stuff? How did you lose yourself in this sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think most players, I think especially like I remember when season 9, especially the season 9, season 10 G2, we had a lot of like a superstition, or like it would almost be like I guess blaming it, or like just kind of a way to deal with a lot of the pressure that was on us, to just like, again, oh, it's the name, or it's this thing or this thing, like to just kind of like have a way to deal with all of that pressure that was on us. And I think the name thing was the same thing, right? I think that, I mean, one, I heard that I could change the thing, so I thought that would be kind of fun to just like change it around. But then the second thing as well was that I didn't feel like myself, right? Like I didn't feel like my usual player. I mean, you said it yourself. I was playing way more reserved, and I felt like I was just kind of like a follow around, going around what everyone else was saying. And I felt like I just didn't feel like Caps, so I was like, oh, maybe I'll just change the name. Maybe that will be the solution. I think at the time I was also saying like, oh, maybe I will like. I think I had a lot of different reasons why, but I think a part of it was also just like making myself like worth the big C again, make a comeback of it. And I think, you know, it's silly, but I think when your whole life is devoted to this like very one specific thing, when things don't go well, it's very easy to go like just more and more downwards, and especially when we had such good success, and then go to like it being very, very bad. And at the same time, it was also around like COVID, so it was like I was seeing my family less, we were just outside less, like it was probably not like the best like health-wise state we had as well, just from like a mental health. So I think, yeah, I mean, I'm just happy things have gotten better, I guess.
One thing I would ask you is, since you phrased it earlier, like you still believe you can win Worlds, even though to a lot of people, I have to say, people from the outside, they can't know obviously how you guys are thinking and what it was ever like. But from the outside, a lot of people would say, quite cynically, that window, as you say, has closed. Like that was the window of these years where you either had the FNATIC team or the G2 Super team, and these were like, the best players in all of Europe, and some of them performed well, and the team had the great runs and the meta and everything that has to come together at once. So what I would ask is this: in the latter years, it feels like a lot of the G2 teams have had quite a similar profile, which is obviously they're really good domestically, and it's pretty much a guarantee you can be in the final or win domestically. But a lot of people feel like they're like always that close to the top Asian team. I mean, to me, we can skip around a little bit here. I would say this year's MSI was a great example. Like on paper, I feel like you beat T1 those 2 times, but if I watched the game, you didn't. You did lose the game. Like it's all well and good going like, oh, we were close, and they were. But I'd still rather be T1 and be the one that wins the match, obviously. So has this been hard for you to deal with yourself? Because at the end of the day, you can only do so much internally. Like you have to either wait for a teammate to develop or the right meta to come. So has it been hard to have these years where like you can be competitive, but you can't win in the same way you did with the super team? Is that hard to deal with, even if you're individually playing well?
Yeah, and yes and no. I think I've gotten way better at being happier with like improving. Like as long as we're improving, I see it as like a good sign, and I think there's been some very significant like steps of improving. I think we kind of dropped the ball a bit too late towards the end of this year, but before that, I think last year, like season 13 summer, we started like improving a lot. And I think this year, the start of the year, we basically had like a year there where we were improving a lot. And then I think now we were kind of dropping the ball towards the end of summer split and then LEC finals and now Worlds. Like we definitely felt like we were, like losing a little bit. But we had a very good part for run there. And I think if we had kept that up, I think we could have won Worlds. I think again, as I said earlier, like we were so close against both T1 and BLG, and sure, we were so close many times, so it feels bad. But I also didn't think we didn't improve much since MSI, so it makes sense that we were like close but couldn't get it done. But if we had actually managed to improve a lot throughout summer split and LEC finals and the Worlds bootcamp and stuff like that, then I think we could have gotten the job done. I guess that's just like how I see it for next year. Like if we can get that level of improvement throughout the whole year, then we will, like, it's not even just that we can win Worlds, we will win Worlds. I think that we would be the favorites. It's just we couldn't keep up the creativity. We couldn't put in and keep up the effort as well. So we kind of like dropped the ball towards the end. But it's a shame. And I think, of course, there's a lot of like there's a lot of like easy excuses, right? And say like, oh, the meta shifted, or like the lane swaps and stuff was like things that we hadn't like we were struggling a lot with during the bootcamp. But at the same time, these are all things that we could have just improved on for like earlier, like the lane swaps. NA was doing it all of summer split. We could have, like, we were even doing it at MSI and stuff, but the new version of lane swap we were struggling a lot with at the start of Worlds. So it's just things that we could have seen as potential issues earlier and tried to fix.
One thing about your career domestically that has been incredible is how many times you've been in the finals, and obviously you've won all but one of them when you were in those situations pretty much. So what I want to ask is this: I know a lot of really even great Western players where some of them have never been in an LEC final, some have been in one or two, or they still think about the one time they were there. Are you actually someone, do you think you see the finals differently? Like, are you able, for example, each split, do you really do a reset and think of it like, I have to win each match and I have to get back there, I have to earn the spot in the finals again? Does part of you feel like if I just play well, I'm going to be in the finals and this success is just going to come? How do you perceive domestic success?
It's definitely different, right? Split to split. I think some splits I have just like taken it for granted that we will not even be in the final, but we'll just win it as well. I think especially like some of the earlier splits, like let's say like season 8 summer and season 9 and some of it, but a bit there where I was like, okay, we will just win it because I had a lot of faith in myself and my teammates. I think after having a few reality checks, as I mentioned, like the world fight, like basically just understanding that like us winning the LEC is great, but the goal is Worlds, and for that we need to be at a level when we enter the Worlds bootcamp that is higher than just winning LEC, basically. Right. So it's not even like, oh, but people will say like, oh, this LEC final will look shaky, but it's not so much about like how we win the LEC, and people will, I think too much of that. It's more about the the concepts we practice, the things we learn. I mentioned the lane swap here, but if we had been better at that, it would have given us a huge boost at Worlds. But we didn't even necessarily have to have a lane swap in LEC finals or even in general for us to be better at it, right? It could be something we could have watched like more replays of NA doing it, or we could have tested in some scrims, and no one would ever know that we had practiced this concept, and it wouldn't have been relevant in the LEC, but it would have been super relevant at Worlds. And it's just like that with many different ideas, and the lane swap is the easy one to talk about because it's just like everyone will understand like how it works. But there's way more specific and like small concepts that we need to work on and improve. And it's like if we get those going, sure, it might not be viable visible right now, but it could be at Worlds and it could be the game changer. So I definitely try my best to win, and I definitely don't take it for granted anymore. I think there's too many too many splits to that. And I also just try not to take a backseat anymore because, as again, I think sometimes in the past I was following other people's ideas, just blindly, because I mean I trusted myself, I trusted my team. I was like, we'll just win this. It's like it's not about which strategy we do, whichever strategy we do, we'll just win it because we're better. And now I really try to make sure that that my input is heard. I think I don't want to just be there. I guess it's the main thing.
One thing I think would actually shock people is how many years now you've actually played. You're actually like a mega veteran. I know you came along later in the years, but think of all the years since season 7 onwards, you've been at the top level. So the question I would ask you is this: if people think of the early caps, they do just think of someone who's trying to use hands to outplay people and do some cocky mid laner move, etc. Right? I would ask this: it feels like you have had development in your game, because for one thing I noticed in the last couple of years is it feels like, first of all, individually you don't do a lot of crazy ints now, but more importantly, it feels like you yourself have a better sense of how to close a game, for example, or to play with the lead. I thought this year you did an excellent job in that sense. Has Caps the macro player evolved, do you feel?
Thank you. I think for sure. I think I was saying a little bit earlier, but I think when I first joined the league, it was I think my hands were very good, compared to the LEC. I think it was probably by far the biggest gap. I think if you take season 7 Caps hands and compared to the second best, even compared to Perkz back then, I think I was there was such a big gap, to be honest. That's how it felt for me. Whenever someone tried to limit it against me, I would always win. It didn't feel actually close. But I would also tunnel vision very much on this thing.
Right.
So I would just die very often to ganks. I would not care about bot lane, top lane, lane state. I would not be thinking about helping out my jungler with camps or anything like that, or setting a vision. And later in the game I would be very lost. I would be playing a different game. It was not even League of Legends back then. So it's I think those improvements have been insanely big. And then they have also come at the cost of course of some my micro and stuff like this. I'm not as tunnel vision on anymore, so I will never reach the same heights. But it's not even because I can't. If I actually started only thinking about that, I mean, I guess it's a bit hard to go put the cat back in the box. I'll say it's hard to tunnel vision like that again. But it's I just put all my focus on this particular thing, right? So of course I was very good at it, and it has definitely hurt that a bit. But at the same time, I've gotten way better at a macro level, and I can not only just not only understand all my teammates' perspective, I can even give them guidance or help them with some of what they should be doing sometimes. So it's it has definitely increased our chance of winning, right? And my chance of winning, I guess that's also obvious.
Right, being as now obviously Mikyx has left the team and you played with him on and off for a whole bunch of years, I want to ask a little bit about him, because the player that originally joined G2, I mean, it's funny you actually said when you were leaving FNATIC he's one of the players you wanted to play with, was actually himself a very different player. He himself was just known as a mechanics player. He was quite quiet guy even. In fact, he's even supposed to be more the follower, is the support, etc. Now, I feel like the guy who just left this year is really different. What's funny is this support player, even in half the games where it looked like he was inting, he would still pull a random macro move out in the mid game. You're like, what the fuck? What the? Mikyx is cracked. And obviously, he did. Look, maybe he overcooked with some of the support picks, but he had some crazy ones. I heard, spoiler, I've got one coming out very soon with Dylan Falco, where he says Mikyx was trying to pull a fucking support TF off or something ridiculous. It sounds like he cooks. That one. If you think about the stuff he plays in real games, guys, he plays some crazy shit in scrims. But who is Mikyx? How will you think of him? What was he like as a teammate? What was his strengths?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, I think very, very strong. I think both him and Hylissang, it feels I feel that gap is especially in the, of course, 5 years ago or something, right? But that gap between them and then the other supports was probably the biggest gap of like any role at like at least in the past, right? Because they were just so much better mechanically, but also at understanding what their job was. They were better at like getting vision. Like they just felt like it felt very easy to play with them. I think Mikyx as like a teammate, I think he's like very like caring. I think he really puts like a lot of effort into making it so that everyone has a good environment, I guess, with each other. And I think it's very important for him as well. I think like talking back to some of the things we mentioned before, where it's like you have to play it out anyway. I think it can be hard for him to play in situations where he doesn't feel like the environment is good. But at the same time, he also does a lot to make it so the environment feels very good, right? So it feels nice. And I think now coming into this year, or like I guess the last 2 years, I think he has been trying way more to like help help the team make like a more broad plan. Because I think before maybe he would follow a lot more like in season 9, season 10, but I think especially after his year in Excel, probably he felt like he had to take charge of a lot of things. And I guess some of the stuff I also was talking about. And I think now he has been way more pushy on making sure that we stay disciplined, whether it be like keeping up our practice or doing rod reviews, or if there's certain things in game that people are skipping out on or being lazy on, creating bad habits and stuff like that. He's been way more pushy on making sure that it gets better.
By the way, since I asked earlier when you were in FNATIC what it was like to work with Dylan Falco, what has it been like these last few years? Because I feel like you've also gotten to have a really unique experience in esports, which is in even sports, oftentimes the first years people are playing together, you have to be actually sometimes selfish. You have to think things like, if I run the team the wrong way, I'm going to get fired, or if I don't win this championship, we're going to get fired, or he's going to get fired, and people often, it's like survival, it's like, do we even work? You guys have played for so long and had so much success. I feel like you are like proper teammates. Like you both have the same sense of like, we're not just going to be gone tomorrow. Like we're here to figure out this problem with whatever players we've got and get this group to the next level and then go to international. Like you must have a very different relationship to him to other past coaches, right? What's it like now to work with Dylan Falco?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think he has like gotten a lot of experience, right? I think he still has a lot, as what I mentioned before, where he has very strong opinions on certain things, and then he will push for it. And he's like very smart about drafting and trying to really optimize our chances of winning. I think like different coaches have different philosophies. Like sometimes it's like about like doing what is like the necessarily the meta versus like what is your player strengths. And I think he has a good balance of figuring that out. Because of course like there's a meta which is like probably the strongest champs, right? But then there's also like what people are actually comfortable on, and finding the balance about that can be very difficult. And I think he's done a very good job of that. And then I also just think he's gotten way more confident in his ideas, and like I mean, again, as I said, he's just even more pushy than before, because before he was confident, but now he's like, he has seen it work before. He saw it work on FNATIC, and now he's seeing it work on G2. So he's definitely gotten a lot more experience.
By the way, it's not just a meme if people don't know, but like if you actually know behind the scenes, if you ask the coaches like what were you bad and what were they going to bad, he actually has had some. He does actually for real take pride, guys, in being like the guy who's trying to like checkmate and like Yu-Gi-Oh! Exodia the draft all the time. And he is actually really good at it though, right, Caps? Like he does have some mega stories where he did like bait people into all the wrong picks and then like fuck their whole draft. He's actually, it is sort of like a skill of his, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think drafting is a huge part of League, right? I think we talked about the fact that with FNATIC before, where we knew their bans and we had a good draft against them. Like, it's very crucial that, I mean, one, you stay like a bit unpredictable, and then of course also that you are also just doing something that's good, right? If you just cook too much, then that's probably not going to work either. So finding the balance, is essential.
Because I had another question along those lines to wrap up the Dylan Falco topic. It goes like this. So people might think you're his problem child because of the infamous that we have to go Vayne now angle. People think that's what you're doing all the time. I feel like in the latter years, though, to give you your credit, I feel like you've also done the opposite the last year or two, too. Like, I've definitely seen some times, Caps, where you could probably have just said at the end of a draft, like, give me the strongest meta mid laner. But sometimes it looks like now Caps will round out the draft and take the bad pick sometimes and take the bad end. Is that true? Are you more of a generous player in that sense now in the draft?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that we probably are, or have a better way of like talking things through. So like I think he's not like as surprised by my picks. Like maybe in the past I might have like kept my opinions more to myself to some extent, and like or maybe he thought I was memeing if I said something, like it wouldn't be communicated properly. And then he would get like a heart attack on stage. But I think now he's more on the same page, and he feels like he's probably gotten his input as well in what I play. So it's like, I mean, I guess that was like the meme about like any pick, I think, for somewhere where he was a bit caught off guard or something. But basically most of the time it's like he knows exactly what's coming. And he also has a big way of shaping it, right? Because I think as like, I mean, I also just, we both have gotten experience, right? He has gotten experience of working with players, and I've gotten experience of like playing all these years. And of course, if you like, if you think something is going to happen, it's good to share it with your team, so that they can like be mentally prepared for it, and also they can just prepare the rest of the draft for it. Because the Vayne was like in a vacuum good against a lot of their picks, but we could obviously have made it better if we had talked a bit more about it before.
I want to ask one question about playing with Hans Sama for all these years now, because one thing I found very interesting was when I did interviews with people who had played with him as his teammates, especially his lane partners, a lot of them actually made it sound like his whole philosophy is very lane focused, and he is the guy who wants to like accelerate the game and sort of have won the game by 20 minutes. And so what's funny is I feel like it's the exact opposite to the old school Rekkles approach, where he was the guy where he wanted to scale up and catch the waves and do the old school team fight and then last hit all the champions. Has it been the case? As from the outside, this is how it seems. Is it the case that, like, does Hans Sama define a lot of how G2 plays? It looks like G2's often at its best when you play to this guy.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I think like right off the gate when we started scrimming, when we like made the team in back in I guess at the end of season 12, it was very obvious that like he knew how to take over games, and he could carry, like he was pretty much carrying every single game we went to LEC. He was also just carrying a lot of games. We would send Yike bot, and we would just send a lot of resources down there, but then he would also just take over the game and win them. And I think at the beginning, like it was like it almost became too much, because I think that was a bit of a problem where I was also just like, I mean, I was like, I'm not gonna ask for Yike when he just we just win the game.
Right.
Like I just want to win the game, right? So if that wins the game, then let's just go for it. But I think we hit like a wall at some point where it was like we just became one-dimensional. You know, we didn't all have all our other strengths, and also from like a practice perspective, we became way worse in the later parts of the game. Like it's funny because on FNATIC and G2 before, we were always quite good later in the game. Like we were actually competing quite often with, if not even better than most of the LPLCK teams. Yes. The problem for us was just that we would get stomped most games. Like we would like, especially in scrims, as I was saying earlier, but we would just very often just be very far behind, and we would make these comebacks to win, or we would just get stomped. But with this iteration of G2, it was actually the complete opposite, where even when we started scrimming against one of the LPLCK teams, we were still doing surprisingly well in the early game, but they were just way better at us later in the game. And in a way, it makes sense, because we also just like, we practice this very like, just snowball. And if it works, we just kind of take over the game, and it also just worked most games. And then when people defended it, or when people did like the equal amount of damage top or mid, or just if their bot lane was also just strong and they fought us back to bot, we got kind of lost in the game, and we didn't really know what to do later on. And I think we fell off quite a bit there, which is also where we like made a lot of improvement like the last year or so, right? Or like that year I was talking about. But yeah, I definitely think he had a big impact on how we have played. And he's like, again, as I mentioned before, a great player is someone who can take over the game, right? So the fact that he can do that is really big. We just need to figure out a way of it not coming at the cost of anything else, right? We need to make sure that that we are not the one-dimensional, I guess.
When I said at the very beginning that when people saw that solo queue shenanigans from the young Caps, they thought like, oh my God, is he toxic? Like, what the hell? I feel like actually now people have gone the other direction. Like now they've just taken the prime super team G2 of like Caps is like a silly guy, or he's got like a crazy sense of humor, and they just think you're like not serious or something, Caps. So what I want to ask is this: if people think you're the guy where it's like, whatever, I play the game, did we win, did we lose? It sounds to me like it actually does affect you a lot, whether like you lose worlds or whether you don't make top 8 or expectations don't get met. Like maybe you just don't show it publicly, or you don't say something publicly, but it does get to you, right? You're a guy who hates to lose, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think I'm a very bad, like I don't like losing. I mean, I when I was a kid, actually something that people would say a lot is that I'm a bad loser and I'm a bad winner.
Bad winner as well. Right?
It's not a great combination, because I get very frustrated when I lose, and I and it like it affects me, right? But at the same time, I also get very like annoying when I win.
Right.
I'm very taunty, so it's like it's I mean it's helped me in some way in League because that does give me the bonus, right? I really want to win just so I can be annoying, but also so that I'm not like frustrated with losing. But definitely, I mean, like this is like I'm giving my life to League, so to say, right? And in my pursuit of winning worlds, so of course I take it super serious. I think as a person, I'm not that serious, I would say, but it's like. So when I have interviews and stuff like this, I will be joking around, or when I can look back at it, I can also joke around and think of it in a fun way. But when it comes to like actually the competition, I'm obviously way more serious, and people will think back to like some of the vain stuff and think like, oh, that's like so troll or something like that. But from my perspective, it was just like, this is how we will win the game, right? So it's like, in a way, it feels troll, and that it like picking vain mid was like a bit troll, but at the same time, it was also like I was convinced that this will win us the game. And I will push for that, right? And it's like, yeah, I wouldn't say I'm unserious, but as like I guess it's just there's two different caps, so to say, right? There's like a in the game and like professional caps, so to say, and then there's like me as a person more so. And I think that's also for most of people, right? Like that's what I mentioned before, that like a lot of people, like I think almost all people I've ever worked with, I enjoyed hanging out with them, and I enjoyed them as people.
Right.
Now, there's been a few people where it's like we don't really see the game on the same page, or like we have had some like I guess creative differences, you can say, when it comes to the game, or I just disagree with the way they handle losses or the way they handle like the team aspect of the game. Like basically, those are two very different things, I guess, is the main part.
By the way, along those lines, when you said earlier after FNATIC, because obviously you were a free agent in that one, you had like LCS offers, etc. Have you ever seriously considered going to America? I know now maybe it's not as big a deal because it's not as many millions, but back in the day, a lot of people just for the money were considering, maybe do a year or two there. Were you ever thinking I'm going to play an LCS one day?
I mean, I definitely thought about LCS. I think, I prefer being in Europe just because it's like my region, right? So there's like a lot of pride with that. But at the time, I thought that Team Liquid was actually doing quite well, and like I think they went 1-1 against us at MSI, and they didn't make it out of groups at Worlds. But I felt like they were quite a strong team from when we played them and stuff. So I felt like they could be a strong team if I was there, I guess.
So basically, it would have been basically the team with Jensen, but with you instead of Jensen, basically, right? The one from MSI, the ones you played, right?
And I mean, they also end up making MSI and actually beating IG as well, so they were strong, right?
True, yeah.
And I definitely like that was one of the teams that FNATIC said like I can talk with all teams. I was like, I want to talk with TL just to like hear what they have to say. But then I think, as I said, I wanted to talk with everyone, like again from NA and EU, at least. And then when I started talking with a lot of the NA teams, I was like, you know what, I actually think I just prefer being in Europe. Again, I think maybe it's a bit of it is like the EU pride, but also like the I feel like I just know the players better. Like can feel more comfortable deciding which team I go on. A lot of the players in NA are a bit question marks for me because I don't know them. I don't know how they work as well, day to day and stuff like that. So it felt like too many question marks. I remember there was also like there was just a lot of teams as well talking at the point because it was the beginning of franchising as well. So in a way, it was also like a very crazy off season. But I think it was like 12, 13, 14 teams plus.
Wow.
Like it was I think almost every single team that off season changed mid laner. Like I think it was like. What teams didn't change mid laner? It was like I think Bjergsen stayed on TSM.
Right.
I think that was almost the only one, right? So like almost everyone was making these huge changes. And we just made world finals, so obviously they also were interested in talking with me. And I remember I also didn't handle it too well at the end because I was obviously getting super stressed from like this huge decision and talking with all these teams. And like I know Jack later on made an interview. I don't remember what exactly he said, but he said basically that I was just like, he asked if I wanted to join C9, and I was like, no, I want to win Worlds. Which is like,
well, you didn't mean it to be Evan, though. You were just being blunt, right?
Yeah.
Right,
It basically,
okay.
I mean, basically, the thing is just a lot of the NA teams came with like these crazy offers about like millions of dollars, you know?
Right.
And I was just basically like trying to say no to them, but then they would be like, oh, but what about this offer? And they would keep going.
Right.
So I was just like, I don't care about the money. I just want to win Worlds, kind of. And I can see that in hindsight that was like quite mean for sure, and I would for sure regret some of the way I reached out to people. But I was also just like, I was super stressed. I mean, Mickey and Perkz have talked. I don't know if they've talked about it, but like the day of free agency, I basically just went offline. Like I didn't talk with anyone, and like FNATIC and G2 was like full panic, because at the time I was mainly those left, but it was like around my birthday as well, and I think I was getting sick. And my mom was like, "Oh, you shouldn't go online." I was like, "Yeah, I guess I'll not go online." So I was like feeling sick, and the stress was for sure getting to me as well, right? Because it was a big decision and tough. But I just went offline for it was not like the whole day, but maybe like 6-7 hours. But when it's like this off-season period, like that is like a game changer. and when I came back, like everyone was just also super frustrated, right? Which was obviously understandable. So it was a weird time.
I have one last question actually about how you see yourself as a player, and it goes like this. If I look at the other players from the G2 Super Team, some of them are still good players or all right players, or some of them still play, but all of them have had drop-offs since then, or they're not considered as good, or they're not in teams that are as good, right? In your case, Caps, even though to a naive fan, they might just think, well, you're better than them. Like, I don't buy that. Like, Wonder might be the best top player ever. Like, Perkz is amazing. Jankos is fucking goated. I think he might even be the best jungler ever. Like, he's fucking insane. So there's something else going on than just talent here. Is there something, do you think you've figured out? Have you figured out something special about being able to come back year after year after year? Like, you don't seem to get affected as much. It also can't just be teammates. You've had lineups that weren't always so insane with every great player. Is there something special you think you've figured out to stay at the top?
I guess I can only talk for myself, so it's hard to compare for other people. I think I've just have like a unique position where it's like I've gotten to work with. I think I'm very good at like learning from other people. I guess it would be my thing. I'm good at like listening to other people or like noticing what makes them succeed. And I've worked with some of the very best. I've worked with the best players, I guess, in Europe.
For sure.
Most of them, at least. Of course, not like the XPK and stuff and players like that, right? But I played with sucess, I played Rekkles, I played with Winther, I played with Jankos, I played with so many like insane players, and I think I'm quite good at picking up on what they do. So I like kind of like copy their strengths and then try to like not take their weaknesses with them. And I think I've just learned a lot from that. I think stuff like, of course, putting in a lot of games is very important, which is already a unique thought, I think, among a lot of LEC players. So I really try to put in as many games as I can.
By the way, why is that? Because I notice actually there does seem to be a decent amount of players think that like solo queues, whatever, when you're a pro, and it's like, oh, as long as I'm pro, who cares? Like, you think it's important to like keep a certain amount up or to put a certain amount of grind in?
Sure, yeah. I think it's super important to like play your games, watch your VODs, do like research. I think it's like, for me, it's always kind of been like either you're doing something league related or you're doing something with your team to like kind of strengthen your team bond, or you're wasting your time. That was kind of like the three things I've had. And I think I really try to like limit the amount of number three I do, basically, which can be tough sometimes, for sure. And sometimes it can be too much, and sometimes you need to just do other things as well, right?
Yeah, sure.
But limit it as much as possible, and just try to grind as much as possible. Make sure you have a good plan on what you pick, like how you play your champions. Make it make sense with the rest of your teammates, and also make sure that the bond is good there with your teammates. I think that's something I especially learned after like the season 11 season.
Right.
I guess mainly season 11, but basically just like I can't just only focus on myself and like playing solo queue, make sure my level is super high. That's not enough to be the best. I also need to make sure that I get along well with my teammates. I skip a few solo queues now and then, and I just do like some team activity with my team, whether it's like watching some show or like playing a board game or just anything else, just to like build that connection, because I think that's also crucial if you want to be the best. You can't do it on your own, I guess.
Yeah. No, by the way, I think you're actually giving like pearls of wisdom here, Caps, because it would be easy as a player to think, well, I'm doing my job, it's his job to do that. But actually, any small thing that like contributes to the atmosphere, the feeling we're all those are the tiny things that probably add up more than a fan realizes, right? They can be a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's like, it's not, finding the balance is hard always. I think I've always had a bit of a what's called, the biggest problem for me was always finding the balance, because I just play League. I got told, League is important to play League. I'll just play League all day, play 24/7. And then it's like, oh wait, that didn't make me win. I need to also have these other parts. and now I have these other parts. I need to find the balance between them, and that's for sure the most difficult part, because the answer is not always the same. Depending on which kind of group you have of like teammates and stuff, you might need to do more with them. You might need to do less. Depending on the patch, you might be more or less comfortable on it. So you also you need to reach a certain point individually, I think, to even have a chance, right? Otherwise, it's like, why are you even here, right? But then aside from that, you also need to make sure that your team can trust in each other, and that you get along well, or at least well enough to work.
I feel like you're one of the few people I can ask this question, not least since you said yourself you're a big Faker fan and you learned a lot from him, right? Here's the problem I have at the moment with me and fans, Caps, which is, look, I'm not even pretending to be an expert. Faker isn't the best mid laner right now. Like, if I was to load up a random game from this year, it'd probably be Chovy or, like Knight in BLG in the playoffs or something, like, these are the players which, if you look at a random game, look like the best player. But in the most important moments, true, Faker has done the big key players. He's done some epic shit. How would you describe this? I notice with pro players, they don't tend to think of like skill as the biggest quality. I notice a lot of they care about things like experience and how you decision making and things like that. What are the things you think now Faker is potentially the best at? It can't just be. It's not pure laning anymore. It's not pure like hard mechanics, is it? So what does set Faker apart, or what do you think his secret sauce is, Caps? What is he good at?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely there's definitely better players than him at being at having laning phase or these like super specific, like as I mentioned earlier, with trying to limit test each other, right? I think that he is just like the best at finding these I guess comeback plays. Like, he's just consistently finding comeback plays. Like, it was similar against us, right? A lot of the comebacks, rather be it MSI or Worlds, was either driven by him, or maybe it was driven by him. The other thing is that I don't know if it's him calling for a TP here, or it's him calling for a play like that, right? So it's like, but all I can say is that he's winning the games, and I'm obviously maybe I'm biased, but I believe that he's doing a lot of the calling there.
Sure, seems like it.
And I think it's the same now against BLG. Now 2 years in a row, right? They were losing, and BLG should maybe be the better team. Everyone is saying Knight is so good, but then he either finds an insane Galio ult or an Asir ult or just anything to make a comeback in the game. And I think other mids do that as well, but it's just not to the same level of consistency, and it's not also on the big stage. I think that's also a game changer, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, he obviously didn't have if you don't look at Worlds, he didn't have the greatest year. Of course, he didn't do that as good as he has done in other years in LCK. But the thing is that, at least for what matters most for most players and what matters most for me is Worlds, right? And Worlds, he was the one who was the most clutch. I think not even just from players, not even from mid laners, but also from players. I think he has just done a lot of very insane comebacks. He did some very clutch RA charms as well. So what exactly makes him? What exact quality is that? It's hard to say. I think he just has a lot of experience of being in these situations, and he has won them before.
Yes.
So therefore he has the confidence to look for it again, right?
Yes.
And it might seem obvious, and everyone should be of course you should always try your best and you should look for opportunities, stuff like this. But he just has, I guess, the experience and the confidence to go for it, right? And risk it all. And sometimes it might cost him the game, but more than not, it has won him the game. And he has managed to make it work at Worlds. People also have to think that Worlds is a little bit of a different environment, I think, to most tournaments, because of the fact that there's way more media days and stuff and travel days. If you think about a day in a split, you maybe just practice all day and that's all you do. But a lot of the time in these 1 week between games, there might be one full day of content, and then another half day of content, and then another day of traveling or whatever. And suddenly it's you're spending maybe half your time playing League, where people are used to playing League from they wake up to they go to bed. And that is also a big game changer, I think, for some players. Some people really rely on playing 24/7 and getting their confidence from that, whereas he might have a better trick of dealing with this kind of schedule, So it's a different schedule, to be honest.
By the way, do you have something a little bit similar in the sense of like when we're talking about players where it's not like they're from minute one of the game and just outperforming everyone and outhandsing them. But the thing I've kind of noticed about like veteran players who are still really good, I think some of your former teammates would fit this bill. Like I said about Mikyx, even if Mikyx was hitting a game, if he was on Poppy support, all you're waiting for is that one Poppy ult in a team fight, you might win the whole game off that. If you think about people like actually Perkz even, one of the reasons I took forever to give up on Perkz is because even in like Vitality, for example, even when he wasn't having a good game, I could sort of tell like, oh, but he's doing that Perkz thing at the end of the game where he's looking for like the one flank he can get off that might like hero win the game. I feel like when you're a veteran, instead of thinking like it's like a race and I have to be leading the whole time, you sort of know like as long as I'm still in the game, there's going to be a chance maybe where I can do the smart move or I can come back in the game. Essentially, like I have to sort of be open to the possibility it's still possible to win the game. Do you feel like you have that quality? Do you feel like you've developed that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think definitely to like also what we mentioned a bit earlier, but I think a lot of it comes from when you're a rookie, you really just want to come in and, at least for me, and what you mentioned with Hans Hammer, so where you just want to stomp someone and you just want to like win from there, right? And you might look at this like a smaller picture in some way, but League is like a lot more complicated than that. And especially when it comes to like all the different champions, there's so many angles to make comebacks, and there's so many like angles to just like close out a game that people might not see. It doesn't have to be like, oh, you go Baron and then you siege and then like there's might be like a TP flank you can set up, or there might be like a champion specific interaction that just ends the game right there for your opponent. You kill them and then you just take their turrets, and these can sometimes get lost when you try to play it by the book and when you try to think too much on your own, I guess. But when you have experience, when you've played with champions before, like when you've like seen these kind of champions interact with each other before, you can like now I've seen the Faker play, or like I've imagined BLG players, they've all seen the when Asia shuffles or something like this, right? I mean, obviously people have shuffled a lot, but like when they shuffle, this is something that Knight will probably think about a lot when he's playing Asia. Like he picked up Asia as well this year. I think he didn't play it much before, and he probably is very aware of like, if I fall behind, I'm not giving up. I'm gonna make this shuffle happen. You know, I'm gonna bring our team back to the game. And the same for Faker, right? Because now he did it. He will have even more confidence to do it next time. Maybe he'll have too much confidence, but basically you just get the experience, right? And in some ways it can make you worse because you get like a more broader view, so you don't get super hyper focused on doing things perfect. But it also helps you because you get a more broader view, so you can see alternative routes. Like basically, you just, instead of going like trying to like if you're driving like a car, instead of going the max speed, you just take a better route, right? That's kind of, I think, the way of looking at it. And most new players will just put everything into speed.
I'll ask this question half jokingly, but it's also half got a real point to it, which is, you know, people make that joke, which is it is almost like Riot wants like Faker and T1 to win Worlds, because it feels like every Worlds, like someone in the big Riot HQ balance machine goes like, right, Azir, Orianna, just turn those up, like, and they always give that exact meta that we always know every like T1 team ever played, right? Inversely, if I think of Caps, I don't think of Caps on Azir as like the favourite champion I want to see Caps on. Like, I want to see Caps on like fucking a playmaker, right? If Worlds, what would be the ideal Worlds meta for Caps is my question. Like, do you want to go, are we going back to like a season 8 of like LeBlanc and Aatrox and the Carly and shit like that? Or do you want Soy back in the meta? What would you want? What would Caps want as his ideal Worlds meta?
I mean, that's a good question. I think for me, something that I've also realized is just, I think I am good at what I practice at. Like, if I practice something, I will get good at it. Okay. So if I put a lot of practice into something, then I will probably play it well, you know. Obviously, there's some champs that I just really enjoy playing. Stuff like Silas. Obviously, it's a shame that I didn't play it more. I think we kind of had the wrong read at Worlds about how strong he was, because it turned out he was actually quite strong.
If you could go back, you'd play that in a bunch of the games.
Yeah, because we played it like once or twice in scrims and we just lost with it. So then it was like, okay, well, we don't play it much. But then when our back was against the wall against BLG, I was like, and when everyone was like, what are you feeling? Like, I was like, yeah, I'm feeling Silas. Let's go for it. And I would have loved to practice it more and put more time into it, because I think it could have been a clutch pick for us. I think stuff like, yeah, you mentioned Zoe. I think that would be very fun to play. I think trying to think of what else could be fun. I think in general, I honestly think the meta this year has been already quite fun. Like, I really like the AD carries for a bit at least. I think when it was only AD carries, it became a bit too much. Like, I like some variety.
Right.
And I think the the MSI meta, like with some of the ASO and stuff, was also pretty fun. I also always liked LeBlanc, so probably LeBlanc being a bit stronger. I think she was like slightly viable, but maybe a little push extra. Yeah, I guess I don't know what else that comes out of the top of my head.
Along these lines, yeah, go on. Yeah. What were you going to say?
Oh, I was going to say I would always wanted to play AP Cog more as well. Mid,
like I played a bit. Fucking hell, okay. Right, old school though, the old school one, the real AP one from a mile away, right? Artillery. Yeah. I say, okay. That was really your era. That was like old school, wasn't it? Yeah, true. What about this then? Along those lines, one last question I had was, I don't know if you know this concept. There's a concept that exists in chess, apparently. Well, what they do is they call this thing the Immortal. And what you do is you pick a great player, and the Immortal is you pick one game he played that's like the essence of who that was. You know, if he was, the analogy would be, like, I guess for T1 in League, you'd pick like a game where they had a great pick comp or something, you know, and they like perfectly moved around that. Right? If Caps had to tell me in his career a game or a series or something, is the one comes to mind, like that's what I'm proud of, like that's who I am as a player? Like if someone had to go and look at a series or a game, what would you tell them to go look at to see who Caps is?
I mean, I guess it's hard with so many years, to be honest.
So?
I think the Vayne one is like just like, I guess like a classic, because it's like so, it's a big like meme, I guess, kind of. I think a game that I'm proud of would probably be I would probably look more towards season 10. So I think either our final against FNATIC maybe, or I think the series against Genji would also be one that I'm
the quarters.
Quite proud of.
Yeah, that was pretty good. The Silas one, yeah. You smurfed it,
right? Yeah, I think I was quite like in terms of like where I was like the happiest with my individual performance, so to say. I think it would probably be like season 10 summer and Worlds. So I would probably look towards there. I think that makes sense.
Okay. Right at the end of this interview, Caps, do you have anyone you would like to thank? Do you have a final message? Do you want to say hello to anyone?
Yeah, I mean, I want to just give a shout out to my family for supporting me. I mean, obviously my dad is always there, so thank you to him. But it's nice to also go back to Denmark and hear how everyone is doing. And in a way, it feels weird to have lived so long. Like you really realize how long I've been in Berlin, and in some ways missing out on a lot of what's happening with my family. So that feels sad, but it's also nice to catch up. So big thank you and shout out to my family.
Tusen tak. Dr. Dre had NWA, DMX had the Rough Riders, and who is the crew holding me down, supporting me when necessary? It is, of course, my Patreon subscribers, the Skrilluminati. So this video, along with all the others on my channel, is kindly supported by Matt Pugnaccio Rakula, Animosity, Bane Diesel, Jason, Jensen Gore, Tosh, Toucan, and you know who a special thanks goes out to, because it's always my main man, Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask a question for my video AMA? Do you want to find out who are going to be the guests on future interview episodes? Do you want to know who the guests are on my talk shows? Or maybe you'd like to suggest a topic or a guest? Perhaps you even want to take part in one of those lengthy, tailored to you discussions around esports that I do with the top tier donators. If any of those perks or others catch your fancy, then put your money where your mouth is, support me, and join the Skrilluminati today via the Patreon link where in the description box below.